بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا.
الحمد لله الذي هدى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى، خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله وأصحابه الذين اجتبى. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون فرحين بما آتاهم الله من فضله ويستبشرون بالذين لم يلحقوا بهم من خلفهم ألا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون يستبشرون بنعمة من الله وفضل وأن الله لا يضيع أجر المؤمنين. صدق الله العظيم. In the previous two sessions we talked about Sayyidina Husain radiyallahu anhu. And as I promised in those sessions that today inshallah we'll be talking about the Shahada of Sayyidina Husain radiyallahu anhu. But before getting into that one, there is one more thing that we need to finish, and that was, we talked about his birth and aqiqah, and at that time I mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam sacrificed only one lamb on behalf of Sayyidina Husain radiyallahu anhu. Whereas we know, according to the Sharia, we have to sacrifice 2 for boys and 1 for girl. But we find in the hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam sacrificed only 1 lamb on behalf of Sayyidina Hasan and Sayyidina Husain radiyallahu anhuma. What was the reason behind this? Many times people object, and especially non-Muslims object to this ruling of the Sharia, that you see a clear discrimination over here between boys and girls. And of course, through this they try to prove their point that Islam puts women down. Of course, this is not our topic today. But we all know that if we look at the orders of the Sharia of Islam, really Islam never puts them down. In fact, the status that Islam has given a woman, she would never have it anywhere else in the world. In no religion, in no country, and in no code made by human beings, women can have the status that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it to her. But that's only once she will accept the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the orders of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. if you read the biography written by many of those non-Muslim women who became Muslims, many of them commonly write this part of their life, that they saw the respect Islam has given to women. Because they had seen the difference. They were on the totally other side before. And when they saw the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the respect the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them, they realized that really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them the status and the respect that they deserve. Is not keeping them on the streets like goats and pigs, wal-'iyāzu billah. That every person just tries to touch and fulfill his desires and lust, and then just throw them back on the street, wal-'iyāzu billah. Or have their pictures on every poster, so that the wealthy people will make their monies out of their beauties and out of their honesty. And how people try to prove that Islam is putting them down is by not understanding the rulings of the Sharia. Not knowing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we have it with us, but we have no time to study it. It's because of our own ignorance. And many times, visiting different places, I hear suggestions from people that there are many ahadith that we really need to reconsider them. Because non-Muslims object because of these ahadith. So we should take these ahadith out of Sahih al-Bukhari or out of Sahih Muslim. We should not present these ahadith to them. And what's the reason behind it? Because this poor person had no time to study the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he read the translation, he was confused and he thought really it could be a very strong objection against this hadith if non-Muslims will read it. And this person didn't know how to satisfy them if they would object. So now it's better to change the deen of Allah because I don't have time to study it. And of course, if we choose that train, then we will have to, wal-'iyāzu billah, change many ayahs of Al-Qur'an also, because just reading the translation, we cannot understand them and we may not be able to explain it to non-Muslims. We have to go into the depth understanding in the light of a hadith and the explanation of Sahabah ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'een and the mufassirin of the ummah. And this is one of those objections that many times people feel that, oh, we don't want to mention this to non-Muslims. We don't want them to know that this is one of the rulings of Islam, that you have to sacrifice 2 lambs on behalf of a boy and 1 on behalf of a girl. They will object to it. And if they would object to it, we don't know how to answer it. So it's our problem, it's not theirs, but really we try in order to hide our problems. We don't want to learn, we just want to change. Or we try to hide the deen then. And many times we find our people trying to hide the deen of Allah. They are afraid if non-Muslims know it, they would object. Subhanallah. As if this deen depends on their understanding and on the understanding of non-Muslims. It's very simple and easy for us to admit and say, I don't know it because I didn't have time to learn it. I'm not a scholar of Islam. I don't know all the reasons behind everything. I just know how to do some simple things in Islam. And if there is more detail needed, then we will refer to someone else. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, it's part of the knowledge that if you don't know something, you say Allahu a'lam. And Allahu a'lam is half of the knowledge. But we are afraid to say it. We like to prove that I know everything. And I can tell you, I can answer each and every question of yours. And then they come with an objection. And in fact, sometimes we have things in our mind that I hope he won't ask me about this. I hope he doesn't know this hadith. I hope he won't ask me about this ayah, because for that person, I don't think there is an answer to it. It's really a strong objection. But really, we are afraid to say to even ourselves that I don't know what's the answer to it. Anyway. In the beginning of Islam, the order given to the ummah was only one lamb on behalf of boy and one on behalf of the girls. It wasn't 2 and 1. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam came to know that the people of book that were in Medina, that means Yahud, Jews, according to their book and according to their religion, they sacrifice one lamb on behalf of the boy, and they don't do anything on behalf of the girls. Since they don't do anything on behalf of the girls, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, we will leave that order the same. But since they do one on behalf of the boy, and we don't want to resemble them in our orders of the deen, therefore make it 2 for boys. So this is how it became 2 for boys and 1 for girls. It was 1 and 1. And the simple example of this is the fasting of the day of Ashura, 10th of Muharram. There was only one day of fasting on Ashura. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he knew that they also fast on the 10th of Muharram, so he said, if I would be alive next year, I would fast the 9th and the 10th, which means add one more day with the 10th, because we don't want to resemble them in our laws of the Sharia. There are some other fasting that are sunnah, and we fast only one day. But Ashura became 2 days only so that we won't resemble them in our practices, in our ibadahs. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Sahabah ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in used to wear imamah. And the kuffar of Quraysh, mushrikeen, used to wear imamah because they used to claim that it's the dress of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we are the followers of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wanted to keep this as part of his dress, as he called it, the crown of my ummah. And he encouraged the ummah to wear this crown. But then, if we would wear it, it will be resembling them in this dress, in this part of the dress. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wanted to keep some difference in that dress also. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam at that time gave this instruction to Sahabah ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, that farqu ma baynana wa bayna al-mushrikeen al-ama'imu ala al-qalanis, that we like to keep some distinction between our imamah and their imamah, and therefore the distinction will be, we should wear the imamah on top of a hat. So we'll have a hat inside and then imamah on top of it, so that there will be, and they don't wear a hat inside, they only have an imamah open from the middle. So he kept that distinction. So this is one of those things about the aqiqah for boys and girls, that it was 1 and 1, but because he did not want to resemble them in this ibadah, and they used to do only 1 for boys and nothing for girls, so he said, instead of just resembling them in boys, let's make it 2. And for girls, we'll leave it as it was in the original order and the original form, and that was only 1. And there are many rulings of the Sharia that are just like this, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in order to refrain from resembling the kuffar and mushrikeen, he gave some special instructions in those orders. This was the point that we were talking about Sayyidina Husain radiyallahu anhu, and when you read the hadith about him, you find only 1 lamb, and this was the reason behind it. Talking about his shahada. Of course, we won't have time to go into the details of the situations and the circumstances of the time. And we don't want, I'm not even going to try to make it an emotional story as many times we hear it. The main thing behind it is to learn the facts. Because sometimes after hearing the stories, we start having objections, even against the person that we are trying to give a lot of respect to. At the end, you will end up having some objections. So we just like to learn the facts around the situation. So we learn what led to that shahada and why Sayyidina Husain radiallahu anhu, after all, left Makkah Mukarramah towards Iraq with only 72 people and then putting himself at a place that he was murdered in the middle of the desert. Sayyidina Husain radiallahu anhu, when he was in Makkah Mukarramah, he received a lot of letters from Iraq. People are asking him to come because after Muawiyah radiallahu anhu passed away, they refused to take the bay'ah on the hands of Yazid. So as they refused to take the bay'ah on the hands of Yazid, they said, we need some Khalifa, so we would like you to be the Khalifa. And all of us, the people of Iraq, have decided and agreed that you will be the Khalifa. And therefore we would like you to come to Iraq and we would take the bay'ah on your hands. And they kept on sending him so many letters that just at one time, one person would come to him with 150 letters, another occasion 200 letters, then 500 letters. And this is how many letters he was receiving while he was in Makkah Mukarramah. And then they sent a delegation to him saying that we have not accepted Yazid as Khalifa. We would like you to be our Khalifa. And if you won't come, then you will be responsible for that because you are forcing us to the Khilafah of Yazid. And you will be questionable by Allah about that. And since we, the whole country, have accepted you as the Khalifa, then you have to come here. So Sayyidina Husain radiallahu anhu at that time decided he should go to Iraq. But other Sahabah ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'een advised him that instead of going yourself, first thing send someone else who would look at the situation, determine what they have been saying is true, and then you can go there if you find that everything is fine and it is how they have stating in their letters. So he sent Muslim bin Aqil to Iraq. When Muslim bin Aqil radiallahu anhu arrived in Iraq, thousands of people were doing bay'ah on his hands on behalf of Sayyidina Husain radiallahu anhu. And he was taking the bay'ah on his behalf, on behalf of Sayyidina Husain radiallahu anhu. Within few days, about 19,000 people took the bay'ah on his hands. So of course when he saw the situation, he realized what he was told was true. So right away he wrote a letter to Sayyidina Husain radiallahu anhu saying that within few days 19,000 people has taken the bay'ah on my hands. And there are many more that are lined up and they will be taking the bay'ah in the next days. So come to Iraq as soon as you can. Sayyidina Husain radiallahu anhu left Makkah Mukarramah for Iraq. On the other hand, the situation in Iraq changed. When Yazid sent Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, who's known as Ibn Ziyad, he was the governor of Basra. He sent him to stop Muslim bin Aqil from taking the bay'ah. He was known to be a very tyrant governor of Basra. When he arrived there in Iraq, people started getting scared and running away, hiding away. And then he started bribing people also. And finally the situation was such that Muslim bin Aqil was left all by himself, no one around him, and no one was even willing to give him a place to stay at, after having those thousands of people around him. When he saw that situation, he quickly sent a message to Husain radiallahu anhu that please stop coming, don't come, the situation have changed. But the time Husain radiallahu anhu received that message was too late. On the other hand, Muslim bin Aqil was captured and then he was killed. Making the long story short, when Husain radiallahu anhu continued his journey, he arrived to a place that was called Karbala. When he arrived over there, he asked, what's the name of this desert? They said, Karbala. He said, it doesn't look to me that I will be going anywhere passing this place. Because the name itself is telling me something. They said, what the name is telling you? He said, Karb and Bala. Karbala. If you break it apart, Karb means disasters, hardships. And Bala means the same type of thing, hardships and difficulties. So he said, this is what the name is indicating. And then he started remembering the dreams he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam telling him about his difficulties that he would go through, being murdered. And in fact, when he was leaving Makkah Mukarramah, many Sahabah told him not to leave. He said, no. When I relate my dreams with the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, I know that this is my time. If I stay in Makkah, it will happen in Makkah. I don't want these type of incidents to be taken place in Makkah because this is a place of peace. Therefore, let me just go, and I'm not going for a war. And this is the point that we need to understand, that he did not leave with the intention of a war of fighting. He left just because those people were inviting him, and according to their invitation, he was going there. And this is why, as he was stationed in Karbala, and Yazid came with his armies and forces, Husain radiallahu anhu gave them 3 options. He said, I didn't come to fight. And he showed them all the letters that he had with him, that see, this is the letters I received from the people of Iraq. It was only for the purpose of having a peaceful bay'ah on the Khilafah. I didn't know that Yazid already has control over Iraq. This is not what the information I had. It was totally different. Since I left and I came to this place, now I'll give you 3 choices. Number 1, allow me to go to Yazid and talk to him myself. I would go to him and I will discuss all the matter with him. And then me and him will decide whatever we have to. Number 2, let me go back to Makkah and just be how I was, because this was the wrong information to me. Number 3, or allow me to go and join one of those armies that are fighting against the Persian Empire that were at that time. Join one of those armies and do jihad over there. And you won't have to worry about anything else. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad was ready to do that and give him any of these options. But there was a person with him who said to Ubaidullah, don't accept none of these things. His name was Shimr bin al-Jawshan. Shimr bin al-Jawshan said, don't accept any of these things. Force him to take the bay'ah on your hand. Ubaidullah is a governor. Husain radiallahu anhu, and a person like him was never supposed to take a bay'ah on the hands of Ubaidullah. So Husain radiallahu anhu said, I have given you all the options that you must accept according to the Sharia. And in fact, if non-Muslims will ask you for any of these options, you at least have to accept one of these options. Forget about a person like me asking you for these options. But of course, there are mufsideen, people who like fasad and mischief at all times. And especially there are people who carry hatred and jealousy in their hearts that doesn't really let them do anything good in their life. It's a disease of a heart that many times people carry unknowingly. And unless we purify ourselves and our souls, we won't get rid of these things. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes oath in Qur'an al-Kareem. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Successful are those who would purify their soul, and losers are those who don't purify it. So anyway, they did not accept any of these options. And finally, they attacked Husain radiallahu anhu and the people around him. As I said, about 72 people were with him. 16 people of his own family members of Ahlul Bayti Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. With the exception of women, all men were murdered over there. Except one boy, young boy was left. Normally in the wars we are not allowed to kill boys anyway. But the zulm those people did was they killed even the young boys over there. And only one boy that was sick was left behind because he was resting in the tent. And later on that boy was known as Imam Zainul Abidin rahimahullah. Inshallah we'll talk about him as we will get to the Tabi'een. After Husain radiallahu anhu was murdered, they cut his head off and sent it to Yazid. Without going into any of those further things of saying anything about these people, the lesson that we learn, very important lesson, that we always have to see the situations right. And remember that just words of mouth from people, that we would do this, we would do this, is never enough. We need action. We need practical things to be done. Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu, when he approached Husain radiallahu anhu, he said to Husain, Husain, why don't you send another person to Iraq and make sure that these people of Iraq have refused to have any governor that is assigned by Yazid. Otherwise, if they have a governor assigned by Yazid, simply means these people are not practical. They are only just using words of mouth. And the second thing we see here, that no matter how great the person is, when people have their hatred in their hearts, and just for their positions, people could do anything. And we find in the history, children killing their parents because of that position. Parents killing their own children. And as far as brothers and uncles and fights between those people, it's very common for these positions. Husain radiallahu anhu was not looking for a position. But we see on the other hand, those people who were looking for that position and they were afraid that if he would get to Iraq, they would lose their position. They, just to have that position, just to be sitting on those seats, just to have that, according to their understanding, some honor on the worldly point of view, that didn't stop them from raising their hands on a person that we cannot say a single word, forget about saying a word, we would consider it a sin to even think anything against him. But they raised their hands, and finally there were such people who would even try to kill that type of person. And they killed him. Doesn't that tell us how careful we have to be about these positions? And when we are looking at these positions, and when we are fighting for these positions, that nafs never allows us to think right. A person who's guaranteed the Jannah by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. A child who grew up playing with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Who was raised in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam were touching all over his body. If people raise their hands on that type of person, then for having a position, people can do anything. Forget about people. We need to look at ourselves. If we are that type of position, we need to really give it a very serious consideration, not to do any mistake, that type of mistake, where we insult others, where we do anything wrong against the Sharia of Islam, against the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just to protect our positions and just to have that name in this life. Wal-ayazu billah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide all of us to Sirat al-Mustaqim and give us the right understanding of
مولاي صل وسلم دائما